Hello everyone, how you doing, my brothers? It's been a while. Yeah, welcome back to part two of our conversation of becoming king. Remember, we are reviewing the book, Becoming King, and I hope you've spent some time in terms of looking at the first uh, one that we've talked about in terms of reviewing Morgan Snyder's book with an input from John Endridge in terms of talking how to become king. And last episode we talked about no shortcut, and that's one of what we looked at, that there's no shortcut in this journey for us to become the king that God wants us to become. And one of the issues we resolve is that we begin to have perfect harmony with time, where we are not in a hurry, but yet we have the agency to really deliver on what God is calling us onto. And so for this week, we continue that conversation, the second habitat for us, out of the 5 habitats for us to secure our kingship. And we're talking about the habitat of embracing failure. And when you hear the word failure, what's Benga saying again today? Yes, we live in a world and a generation where failure, it's seen as a plague, and so we've been advised to avoid failure by all means necessary. And however, any man that must truly become what God wants us to become cannot avoid failure. And not just any king, a king with maturity. Those that come that, so our resume has to have both failure and success. Like if you have any friend that says, "Oh, I've never failed in my life," or people that cannot really connect to their emotional being, or they're just saying, "Well, the way people have it, the truth, honesty is that I've not had that kind of experience in my life." People that say things like that, you need to run away from them. It means they have not really connected to the authentic self. They're still living in the superficial world that they've built around themselves, a facade that they build around themselves. And when we talk about failure here, we're not talking to live a mediocre life. We're not talking to live below God's expectation for you, but we're saying failure in terms of you've tried things, you put in your best, and it's not still working. Yes, there's a lesson to be learned from it, and there's a reason why it has happened. But we live in a generation that people think wants to start a business or wants to start anything because God told you to start it. It means that you have to succeed. I was reading a quote somewhere by Timothy Keller that was saying that you had a vision from God, or you said a project from God, does not mean it will not fail. Sometimes what God has set you out for is the failure of that business for you to also learn a lesson that you show to others. First, again, what are some of those things that He wants you to learn? So most times we live a failed enterprise or a failed experience, a failed relationship, without really picking up any lesson, without really sitting and asking God, what do you want me to learn from here? And it's always very, very important for us to come into that space. So failure for us as men sometimes means the next door to your treasure island. It means the next door to uncovering everything that God wants you to cover. You know what's so funny? That every one of us have known the success story of men and women that built the world. Men and women contributed to the world, and we learn from their failure. We see how through failure they built they built legacies, they built things that as I live them. But funny enough is that we still run from it. So sometimes I get confused because even myself, the way we are raising kids and all of that, we know that failure has a powerful tool to change life, but we still try to send kids away from them. And so you see us, we put kids in different programs, lessons, music class. We're just dragging them and draining them of their emotional well-being, but because we don't want them to fail. But we know that, but we still say the other side that, oh, there's power in failure. But for us as men, we need to challenge ourselves. Are you failing? So the question you should be asking yourself that Snyder was teaching us in the book is that you should be asking yourself, how am I succeeding? Ask yourself, how am I taking great risks despite the chances of becoming failure? How am I taking daring? Not how are you succeeding? There's this famous quote by Teddy Roosevelt that was delivered in Paris in 1910 that was quoted in this book. A lot of us have quoted it. People know it as the man in the arena. He said, I'll quote directly, he said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who point out how the strong man stumbles or where the doers of this could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives violently, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and no shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasm, the great devotions, who spend himself in a worthy cause, who are the best, knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, who are the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never, I love this last line, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And so defeat is part of the journey. And so if there's anything you must do to yourself, you must come into a point in your journey with God into becoming a king, is for you to go back and look at all where you failed in your life. You might be 20 years old, you might be 30, you might be 40, you might be 50, you might be 60. For the something listening to this podcast, you need to go back and check all of the places you have failed and begin to ask yourself, what were the lessons for me here? What were those deeds? You should be proud of yourself, of everywhere you failed and you've risen again. Never allow the society cheat you and say, because the truth of the matter is that most people that are successful today are from the result of their failure. But you see, we're having the increase of, in terms of this glamour life that people watch on TV of celebrities and all of that, and we're building a generation that is not strong, that does not have resilience, because by the time reality dawns on them in their private life, they break apart because society has shown them these perfect people that have never failed before. But the truth of the matter is that everybody you see on the pedestal have failed, are failing, and are still rising and going. So as men over your household, as men, you need to show example to your kids. Where are you taking risks from your failure? Are you running away from failure? But the second part to our habitat of becoming kingsmen, mature kingsmen, is that no shortcut. And the second one is that you must embrace failure as a lifestyle. For me, embrace failure as a lifestyle is not that you set out to fail. It's for you to know that failure is part of the journey. So there was this quote, like they talked about the Marine. I like talking about the Marine a lot because I love the way the training is organized, and I love how their discipline and how they've been trained in terms of being faithful men and taking care of each other. And so there's something quote that he was also talking, Snyder was talking about the Marine. He said the Marine motto says, plan for success and train for failure. And so you are planning to succeed, but you also need to train for failure. And that is the quote I'm leaving you with. That is how you manage failure. That is how it separates from mediocrity, or people that no longer put any effort in life, not people that just sit back or lay back. That's not what God is calling you to. God is saying plan for success, but you should train for failure. It means, and one of the things is just you coming to the point. Remember the last week we were saying you come into harmony with time. In the last episode, you come into harmony with time, where you're no longer in a hurry, but yet you have the agency to deliver the thing at the right time, at the right spot. And so what this second habitat is calling you to is for you to be able to get to a point where you lay down your control of outcome. You no longer have control of the outcome. One of the things that get people into trouble, that no longer make them make risks or afraid of failure, is that you want to control the outcome. And once you want to control outcome of things that affects your relationship with your wife, your friends, your spouse, because you always want to control the outcome of a conversation. You want to control the outcome of your relationship. You want to control even the outcome of things at work. And most times you get stuck with your subordinate or your workers that work with you. Yes, have the good plan. Yes, there's a need to companies to have outcome. What do you want to achieve? But lay it down. You don't have to have control over it. You need to do all of your best, put in all of your effort, and whatever comes out of the outcome, then you take it like that. But most times in your control of the outcome, you get hurt, you get into a lot of trouble in life. So the invitation this week or this episode is that you lay down your control of outcome. So you begin to ask the right question: where am I daring to take risk? Not where am I succeeding? And again, I need to clear out something, that the episode is not saying you shouldn't plan for success. That is not saying that you shouldn't celebrate your successes. Yes, celebrate your successes, appreciate the little things, but it's inviting you that you don't need to have control of everything. Lay it at the master's feet, walk according to his plan, and see how he leads you. So I'm going to be concluding by reading directly from what Snyder said in his work. He said we should remember the words of John Ruskin, and this is what John Ruskin said. He said the highest reward for one's store is not what he gets for it, but what he becomes by it. I read it again. He said the highest reward for one's store is not what he gets for it, but what he becomes by it. End of the quote for John Ruskin's quote. And Snyder continued to say here, said, It is the only thing we take with us from this world. It's what God gets out of our lives, the person we have become. Live in the day and measure by the decade. Few things have more power to help us cultivate a life-giving habit of soul than unhinging our emotional life from outcome. You need to separate your emotional life from outcome. And renouncing the idolatry of success as our measure as a man. Let success not be your measurement. If not, you will not live a life of gratitude. Now, I've seen a lot of people that they're not so grateful. They complain always. Every time you see them, they're driving because they have measured their life by success. So I need to build a house by this time. I need to have this car, material possession. I need to be the CEO. I need to be the director in my career. I need to be the best at this time. Those are great things. But if you plant your life based on that, you're going to get further injury. Or you might have achieved all of those other things in expense of true relationship and true friendship. And so what the invitation is that you need to renounce the idolatry of success as your measure of what you become as man. I conclude again from what he said. He said, as we practice the habit of letting go of outcomes and increasing risks, it isn't that failure will hurt less, it is that they will hurt better. Again, I repeat, it's not that failure will hurt less, but they will hurt better because you are picking lessons and you're picking things from that invitation that God is inviting you to. So I hope you've been blessed. I hope you've been able to pick out something, remembering that failure is part of the journey. Failure is part of where we are being called to in terms of becoming king. So until we meet again next week, we'll be talking about the third one, which is you choosing the lower seat. And you understand what it means for you to choose the lower seat. I will invite you to go now, practice, no shortcut, and begin to embrace failure as a habit. So until we meet again, stay blessed, my brothers. May the King of Kings keeps us. May His grace rest upon us. May He continue to help us to become the men that He's inviting us into. Shalom. Bless you. Remember again, it's been the Art 1920 podcast, a podcast for men and by men, where we teach each other, where we encourage one another to become that which God wants us to become as kingdom men, leading our homes and our generation. Bless you and bye-bye.